I think you wrote on your blog that a Dave Brody from the Christian Broadcasting Network, Pat Robertson's outfit, will one Sunday show up on Meet the Press, but an Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Will never show up on Meet the Press. What's behind that phenomenon?
I think part of the reason is that if Amy Goodman came on Meet the Press, she would say all sorts of things that not only challenge the people on the program, but challenge what they had been saying over the years. Would go back and, in a sense, discredit the narrative that's been building up for a long time. And even though it's maybe not wholly conscious, the idea that there's a kind of building narrative that is more or less accurate, that we kind of tell you what's going on in Washington, is a common assumption in the press. And people who would completely shatter that don't.
I think that's exactly right. It's all about the content of views. Rush Limbaugh can depict himself as being this insurgent outsider, but he supported the wars of the last 8 years. He supported the tax policies that Ronald Reagan essentially instituted as conventional wisdom, that we need to lower taxes, reduce government spending. All of the conventional cliches that the media airs frequently and doesn't need much time in order to explain are ones that Rush Limbaugh and the furthest fringes of the right essentially embrace. And so to include them into our discussions is not very disruptive at all. Whereas if you had people on from the left who were advocating things like the United States' responsibility for its unpopularity in the world, the fact that we wage wars and bomb other countries and invade and occupy other countries far more than any nation on the planet, to include somebody like that would not only threaten the vested interests of everybody who's participating in these conversations, it would disrupt the entire narrative. As Jay said, it would almost sound foreign, as though these views are unserious views, don't belong in mainstream serious shows, because these views are never heard. They're stigmatized, they're demonized as being things that don't really deserve a platform, and so you can't include advocates of these views in these shows.
You know what's really striking to me about this is Lawrence Wilkerson, who worked for Colin Powell, when he retired from the government, he said that the people in power, Cheney, Bush, and Rumsfeld especially, were, in his view, radicals. That the radicals were the people actually running the government. And this idea that the people in power were kind of outside the sphere of normal government never made its way into the establishment press at all. The idea that Wilkerson could have been right, that the real radicals were running the federal government, never really penetrated their narrative at all.
How do you explain the fact that so many in the press, pundits and others as well, were saying Obama has to be bipartisan?
I think that the ideology of the press is not so much liberal or conservative. They think themselves the keepers of realism, of savviness. I think the real religion of the American press is savviness. And in their view, it isn't savvy to say, you're going to mobilize the anger and frustration of the American people and bring that power to Washington to change it. That's not how politics works. The way politics works is you say things like that to get elected, and then once you're in, you make your accommodations, you show that you want to hew to the center, you demonstrate you're bipartisan, you pick people who are familiar, and it's those eternal laws of politics that journalists feel they know better than us. And they expect politics to try to run down these rails that they've laid down, because then we have to turn to them for the inside story. And this is what they want to continue.